Ubisoft is a company that I've always had a not so good relationship with. In my last video, I pretty much blasted their practice on cutting video games apart and selling them as deluxe editions or ultimate editions, pretty much confirming to everyone that video games have always costed $70 in the past couple of decades, even more thanks to this butchering. But even before that, I've had several contentions with their games, mostly because their recent ones have been rather unimpressive lately. Odyssey was a chore to get through. I couldn't even muster the energy to finish that game. Far Cry New Dawn is a lazy standalone expansion pack to the not so bad but not so impressive Far Cry 5. And finally, Ghost Recon Breakpoint renames pay-to-win microtransactions as time savers, basically saying that you can pay Ubisoft to not play the games that they're selling, which one, you can do that for free by not buying the game, and two, it's a very nice way for Ubisoft to say that you should skip the game because it's absolute trash. The absolute final nail to the coffin for me and a lot of the PC gamers out there is the fact that they're gonna put the next installment of their games into the Epic Game Store, a store that isn't as good as Steam. Not that I blame them for going into Epic instead of Steam. Epic's lucrative 88% share compared to Steam's 70% share is gonna make Ubisoft a hell of a lot more money, and this move just describes them perfectly in that they're not here to make actually good and fulfilling video games. They're here to make loads and loads of money by taking them out of your pocket and putting them into their pocket. My question to all of you gamers out there is, do you really want to continue letting Ubisoft to foster this environment of complacency and money milking, especially with the recent scandals that they've been having? Yes, by the way, Ubisoft has gotten quite the scandal, detailing the many inappropriate behaviors that the higher-ups have around women. This article pretty much sums up a lot of the things that they have done. It's worth a read to a lot of people. I'll link to it down below. But you're not here to have me tell you to read an article. You're here to have me tell you what's going on so you don't have to read it. Alright then, welcome to this video. Support this channel by checking the links down below. The tilde version is that Ubisoft's corporate culture fosters an uncomfortable environment to women and also even people of color, where the higher-ups of these companies are free to do the things that they do without any sorts of repercussions, hitting the usual Me Too allegation beats that we've seen a million times from other companies, individuals, or entities in general. In case you haven't been paying attention to the recent allegations of immature and unprofessional behaviors being alleviated to a lot of significant figures among the entertainment industry, I don't blame you, so let me highlight the general gist of what I meant. The allegations refer to a corporate culture in which women are mistreated by the higher-ups of the company by making explicit and discriminatory comments that generally refer to lustful behaviors, and that's just at their best. At worst, they are subjected into unwanted romantic advances and other types of behaviors purely because they're women. A lot of these claims have been brought into attention, but for the most part, they are ignored, mishandled, or undermined. So in other words, standard Me Too stuff. But there are a couple of highlights that I really want to bring up because these are some of the dumbest and funniest thing that I've read in a while. The first one is the fact that they called John Boyega a monkey back in 2015. I mean, I don't know what kind of corporate culture that they're trying to bring into the table with that level of immature humor, but I can tell you that that's not exactly a pleasant one for all the non-white people in the room. The second one is the allegation of an employee being instructed that she should smile more and that she'll be fired from her job as a purchasing specialist if her attitude didn't improve. Yeah, how would you be able to smile more if you're fostering a culture in which you make women in general uncomfortable? Oh, by the way, the women in Ubisoft are outnumbered about 4-1 compared to the men, so it's practically a sausage fest. Not only that, but Ubisoft is still run by the same people that foster and encourage these behaviors, so the hopes of this company having an extensive change for the culture is pretty unlikely. The third one is the allegation that Ubisoft's chief creative officer, who is under the consideration of either being demoted or straight up axed from the company, thought that it would be a good idea to have a meeting on a freaking strip club. Unsurprisingly, the female employees felt uncomfortable with that suggestion and straight up not attend the meeting, which pretty much ruins their career in the process. Imagine the arrogance of someone wanting to have business meetings consisting of male and female employees in a place where women are degraded into properties of men. It's not GTA 5 the last time I checked. And then there's the incident where the same chief creative officer decides that during a meeting, it would be a good idea to show a YouTube video of a French song long describing incredibly explicit acts of a woman who has the same name as the presenter of that meeting. This person has gained a reputation among the Ubisoft employees, especially the women, that they should never ever have a drink with him because he would make some really uncomfortable moves. However, it goes beyond just that guy. There are allegations made towards a lot of the higher-ups on Ubisoft. One of them is a veteran for 13 years who openly flirted with subordinates, made discriminatory jokes towards the non-straight people, and performed unwanted massages. Not messages, massages. The same person also shared explicit and unsafe messages and even videos around. He even asked female employees out for drinks and they refuse every time. There's also the fact that we have people on Ubisoft telling a woman that she cannot be a producer because she's a woman. Honestly, considering the culture that Ubisoft fosters around the company, that is actually not an inaccurate statement. Not that you want to be a producer in a company where people propose to grab their most sensitive bits. No, I'm not kidding. But those are all the typical corporate culture that the entertainment industry has been fostering and normalizing for a while. For a lot of us who are not working in these big corporations, there's really nothing much that we can do other than to encourage people who are in there to quit and encourage others to, please, for the love of God, do not work in these companies. But unfortunately, not a lot of these people can quit because this is the only job that they had at the moment, and current year isn't really a good time to be talking about quitting jobs. Now let's talk about the gaming part. This one is quite interesting too because a lot of the creative decisions from Ubisoft was sort of caused by this corporate culture that they had. Turns out that originally, Assassin's Creed Origins was going to injure or kill off the male hero Bayek early on in the story and give player the control to his wife Aya. But her role gradually shrank over the course of development and Bayek becomes the lead figure of the game because we clearly don't have enough male assassins. And in regards to Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Cassandra is pretty much the canon protagonist, but Ubisoft decides to do the clever move of giving the players the option, which results in most gamers picking Alexios. Typical women-hating gamers, am I right? And finally, there was a time where both the marketing department and the same chief creative officer who thought that having a business meeting on strip clubs is a good idea, said that female protagonists in video games wouldn't sell. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, female protagonists in video games wouldn't sell. It's really funny that I read through all of this stuff that I'm expecting video game companies like Ubisoft to adhere into the increasingly politically correct culture that we've been grudgingly having for the past. But clearly I'm wrong, or at least according to this article. Clearly no one at the higher-ups on Ubisoft is paying attention to the situation that we're having in current year, where scandals of inappropriate behaviors around women are being thrown left and right. Clearly these companies are only saying in the front that they have a diverse and welcoming culture from all races and genders, and then they call John Boyega a monkey or having meetings on strip clubs. And then there's the statement of how video games with female protagonists wouldn't sell, coming from the freaking marketing department. But the thing is, despite me giving the marketing department a barrage of articles and games that completely disprove their point, I don't think they're going to listen. But here's the shocking part. I actually believe that this is an opinion that they might have. But it's not because they don't do their research. It's because they did. But they only did it for their own games. The Far Cry games don't have a female protagonist until the 5th one, and even that one is a generic silent female protagonist that contributes nothing to the story. Assassin's Creed doesn't have a female protagonist until Liberation, and that game got access to the Vita before it got a full release everywhere else. The Watch Dogs games don't have one until Legion, unless if you count that very brief moment at the end of Watch Dogs 2 where you play as Satara. The Rainbow Six Siege characters are actually quite diverse, but you're not gonna get that vibe when the game's promotional material doesn't accentuate that. Of course, the marketing department of Ubisoft would have this opinion. The most successful franchises that they have right now are centered on male protagonists. Ubisoft does not have a game or a franchise that has a female protagonist that actually sells very well. So to them, having a game with a female protagonist is a risk, even though having a game with a female protagonist to the game industry as a whole is pretty much a safe option that can still net you millions of copies sold because gamers in general don't care on who they play as. And that's one of the revelations that a lot of you people, especially those who keep on demanding female protagonists in fiction, need to realize. To companies that have successful and well-established franchises that mostly center on male protagonists, having a female protagonist is a risk, and companies in the entertainment media don't really like to take risks these days. They would like to go to a much safer option that attempts to please everybody, but in reality pleases nobody. One of those ways is having options, which is good for games that have a speaking protagonist, but not so good for games that have a silent protagonist. Ubisoft is not the kind of company that would take risks. All they want to do is to milk as much money as possible with the tiniest amount of effort. It is shown by their move in adding so much microtransaction and breakpoint, making the game to be absolute trash in general, cutting portions of the games and selling them as deluxe or ultimate editions. And most importantly, putting their game on Epic instead of Steam because Epic gives them more shares. I love their reasoning too. At first they say that Steam is unrealistic and doesn't reflect where the world is today in terms of game distribution. In other words, it doesn't give us more money. The second statement in regards to Epic Game Store is that it's beneficial for publishers, both large and indie, and the video game industry. In other words, it gives us more money. To put it in perspective, EA recently released a lot of their games on Steam. That's right, freaking EA, that mostly released a lot of their games on Origin, just released their games on Steam. It's insane to me how we're living in a time where Ubisoft manages to be a lot greedier than EA, and they have been pretty greedy lately. In conclusion, a lot of these behind-the-scenes scandals are things that I've come to expect from companies as big and pretend progressive as Ubisoft. But it's not that angers me. This news is more of a PSA in the kinds of corporate culture that you'll be facing once you get into developing video games for the big leagues. And it is to be expected, sadly enough. What angers me is your incredibly stupid moves that have been grinding my gears lately. You have multiple editions of the same video game that you got by cutting parts of the game and reselling them. You put your PC games on Epic instead of Steam because it gives you more bucks despite you being a really big publisher that doesn't need any more bucks. You have pay-to-win microtransactions in your games and call them time savers. Your recent games have been nothing but mediocre trash. All of these are your pathetic attempts on squeezing as much profit from the customers as possible with the least amount of effort. So much so that even EA is less greedy in comparison. So if you're one of those ignorant halfwit who still think that Ubisoft is there to make good games, I don't know what else to tell you, but go gobble up their generic, mediocre, and formulaic sandbox games, as I am here gobbling up sandboxes that are made with developers with actual competence. Review on that coming soon.